The Dell Lobo Gang.
Si un caballo está cansado, lo azotas. Si está muy cansado...
The Dell Lobo Gang is one of the nastiest gangs in the whole game. You'll mostly run into these guys out in New Austin, and they're not the type to wave hello. They shoot first, ask never. You'll spot them posted up in places like Fort Mercer, Gaptooth Breach, Solomon's Folly, and especially Thieves Landing, which kind of acts like their main base. Basically, if you're anywhere west of the map and you hear gunshots, it's probably them. In Red Dead Online, they're even more aggressive. There is a mission where you're sent to take down Alfredo Montez, but you end up killing his brother Jorge by mistake. Later on, you finally catch Alfredo, and the gang goes all out trying to break him out of jail. It gets messy. Full-on town shootout in Valentine. And even after that, they're not done. They try to hang a marshal in Tumbleweed, and yep, you're the one who has to stop them. Now, Rockstar definitely pulled from real history with these guys. Rebel fighters from the borderlands, anti-government missions, that kind of thing. You can see it in how they dress, how they act, and how deep their grudge goes. These guys are active, brutal, and always pushing. Even in missions where they're not the main focus, you'll still bump into them, trying to rob, ambush, or flat out kill you. They don't care who you are. If you step into their land, you're either walking out bloody, or not walking out at all. The Laramie Gang.
Delicious. Oh!
These guys don't act like usual outlaws. The Laramie Gang works more like a business, but the kind that comes with fists, fire, and a body count. You first meet them in the epilogue when John shows up at Pronghorn Ranch. They roll in like they own the place, hijack his wagon, rough up the workers, and try to muscle out the landowner, David Geddes. Classic hired guns. Thing is, they're not doing this for themselves. They're working under the table for Abel Atherton, a wealthy rancher who wants the land and doesn't care how he gets it. That's their whole deal. The Laramie Gang are enforcers for the rich. When polite offers stop working, these guys step in. First it's threats, then it's beatings, then it's fire. You don't sell, you disappear. And they clearly enjoy the job. John doesn't let it slide. After they go too far, burning buildings and killing ranch hands, he, Abe, and Tom Dickens take the fight straight to Hanging Dog Ranch, where the gangs hold up. You can play it quiet or loud, but either way, it ends with John putting a bullet in the gang's leader. But that's not the end of them. Even after this mission, you'll still find them at Hanging Dog Ranch, ready to shoot if you get too close. They're still scattered around Big Valley too. Not as strong as before, but still dangerous. And if any of this sounds familiar, it should. Rockstar took heavy inspiration from real history, especially the Wyoming Stock Growers Association and the Johnson County War of the 1890s. Back then, rich cattlemen actually did hire gunmen to scare, kill, or burn out small-time ranchers who refused to sell. The Laramie Gang follows that playbook almost exactly. It's right down to the corporate-style name, Laramie Corporation. The worst kind of gang doesn't steal from you. They take your land, burn your home, and call it business. The Lemoyne Raiders. The Lemoyne Raiders are leftovers from a war that ended, and they still haven't accepted it. Basically, they are a full-blown militia made up of ex-Confederate soldiers and younger recruits who never moved on. You'll mostly run into them around roads, Scarlet Meadows, and sometimes near Saint Denis. They're not just looking to rob trains or cause trouble. They think they're fighting a cause. A lost one, but a cause all the same. Unlike some gangs that charge in loud and messy, the Raiders fight smart. They set up ambushes, use military weapons, and come at you with numbers. You'll find them holed up in places like Shady Bell, Fort Brennan, and old plantation houses, wearing dusty gray uniforms like they're still in formation. They're especially hostile toward anyone they see as part of the North, which, in their eyes, includes lawmen, city folk, and basically anyone not waving the same old flag they are. They're also heavily tied to the Braithwaite family, working their moonshine routes and guarding shipments. In the main story, Arthur first crosses paths with them during the Clemens Point chapter. You help the sheriff crack down on one of their stills. Later, they try to rob Arthur and Sadie on the road. Big mistake. Then Lenny gets wind of a weapons stash they've got tucked away in a plantation, and you take it, not without a fight. You can also track down their leader, Lindsay Wofford, in a bounty mission. He's holed up in Fort Brennan, and when you bring him in, you either get a hanging or a body dump, depending on how that fight went. They didn't lose the war. They just kept fighting it long after everyone else moved on. The Foreman Brothers.
This is over!
This gang story ties back to one of your own, Tilly Jackson. Before she joined the Linde Gang, Tilly was part of the Foremans. Things went bad. Real bad. She was abused, and eventually she killed Malcolm Foreman, one of the leader's cousins, and ran. Anthony Foreman, the guy in charge, never let it go. In his eyes, she betrayed the gang, and he wants payback. You first meet Anthony and Valentine when he starts harassing Tilly out in the open. Arthur steps in and Anthony backs off. For the moment. But that's not the end of it. Later in the story, the Foreman Gang tracks Tilly down and kidnaps her, dragging her to Radley's house near Rhodes. It's one of those missions that hits different. Not just because of the violence, but because of who it's aimed at. Susan Grimshaw doesn't wait. She grabs her rifle, Arthur grabs his guns, and together they ride in to bring Tilly back. Clean, fast, brutal. When it's over, you've got Anthony in your hands, and that's when the game gives you a choice: kill him or spare him. Either way, the gang's done for. By the time 1907 rolls around, the Foreman boys are gone. Disbanded, forgotten. Just another name in a long list of gangs that didn't last. Some gangs fall over money, others fall over pride. But this gang fell because they messed with the wrong girl. The O'Driscoll boys.
Don't look like one of ours. Does he, boys?
If there's one gang that's guaranteed to cause chaos wherever they go, it's the O'Driscoll boys. You can't go 5 minutes into the story without hearing Dutch or Arthur curse their name. They're a huge outlaw gang run by Colum O'Driscoll, and they've got one major obsession: destroying Dutch van der Linde. The two used to be allies, way back before the game starts. But it all blew up after Colum's brother was killed and Dutch's lover got caught in the crossfire. From there, it turned into an all-out blood feud. You'll bump into these guys early, first at Adler Ranch, where they've murdered Sadie's husband and are holed up in the snow. Later, you raid one of their camps at Ewing Basin. What makes the O'Driscolls different from most other gangs is their size. They're not skilled. Colum recruits just about anyone who can hold a gun and ride a horse. That's why their camps pop up everywhere, from the Heartlands to Cumberland Forest to Big Valley. You're constantly running into their patrols, ambushes, and hideouts. One of their former members, Kieran Duffy, ends up joining the van der Linde Gang after saving Arthur's life. It doesn't sit well with Colum. Later on, the O'Driscolls capture and torture Kieran, and then send his mutilated body back to camp on horseback. It's one of the darkest moments in the game, and it kicks off a massive attack. The conflict keeps building. Colum even tricks Dutch into a fake parley just to kidnap Arthur, trying to use him as bait. But it all falls apart, and eventually Colum's captured by lawmen in Saint Denis. He's sentenced to hang, but his gang shows up to bust him out. Doesn't work. Dutch, Arthur, and Sadie shut the whole thing down. Colum looks up at Arthur standing on the rooftops and realizes, this time there's no way out. And just like that, he's hanged. They had numbers, they had rage, but in the end, the O'Driscolls were nothing more than a loud, angry crowd, led straight to the gallows, the Saint Denis Mob.
Chi sono sti buffoni?
Sono qui per picciotto.
If you spend enough time in Saint Denis, you'll start to notice something odd. People disappear, bribes pass hands, and yet, the cops don't seem to care. That's not a bug. It's the mob doing what they do best. Quiet power. The Saint Denis Mob is led first by Angelo Bronte and later by his right-hand man, Guido Martelli. They operate more like an early version of the Mafia. Smooth suits, polished manners, but underneath that, it's smuggling, extortion, and good old-fashioned murder. And thanks to Bronte's money and connections, the Saint Denis Police Department looks the other way. Most of the time, at least. Their base of operations is Bronte's mansion on Flavian Street. You'll go there during the main story after the Braithwaites kidnap Jack Marston and hand him over to Bronte. When Dutch and Arthur show up to get the boy back, Bronte agrees, but only after they do a little dirty work for him. Later, Bronte invites the gang to a fancy party at the mayor's house, where you see just how deep this guy's influence runs. That's also where he feeds Dutch false info about a trolley station heist. It's a setup, of course, and Dutch doesn't take that lightly. In true Dutch fashion, the gang storms Bronte's mansion at night. Arthur and John find him hiding in a bathtub. His gun jams, he panics, and eventually he gets hauled off. Bronte wakes up on a boat, runs his mouth one too many times, and Dutch drowns him, feeding his body to the gators. It's brutal, but it marks the end of Bronte's control. In the wild, outlaws shoot for power, but in Saint Denis, they just buy it. Ike Skelding's boys.
Now don't make me ask twice.
Whoa! What are you trying to...
This gang operates as bounty hunters. Officially, they're after wanted men. Unofficially, they don't care how they get paid, as long as the money's good. They're known for picking up high-profile targets and flipping them to the highest bidder. They get directly involved with the van der Linde Gang when they capture Sean McGuire, one of the gang's most unpredictable members. Sean had been with the crew since the Blackwater job, and by the time the gang sets up at Horseshoe Overlook, he's been missing for a while. Josiah Trelawney figures out where they've got him. And in the mission, The First Shall Be Last, Arthur, Charles, Javier, and Trelawney head out to get him back. What starts as a stealthy approach turns into a full-blown shootout, and by the end of it, Ike Skelding's crew is wiped out. You never actually see Ike himself, and after the rescue, his gang is never heard from again in the main story. They weren't outlaws. They weren't lawmen. Just guns for hire. Who aimed at the wrong gang? Micah's gang.
And on the other, their mortal enemies, the Braithwaites, moonshiners, hypocritical, both rolling, we believe.
If there's one name that brings out pure hate in Red Dead fans, it's Micah Bell. And by the time the credits roll, he's not just a traitor. He's running his own gang. After the Linde Gang falls apart, Micah disappears for a while. But by 1907, he's back, and leading a new crew, one built on robbery, murder, and flat-out chaos. Guys like Joe and Cleet ride with him, and together they've built a reputation for brutality. Some of the things they do, including dismemberment, are so violent even the press starts comparing Micah to Dutch. You take them on in the mission American Venom. It starts when Sadie finds Cleet and Strawberry. She, John, and Charles hunt him down, beat a confession out of him, and Cleet finally gives up Micah's location, Mount Hagen. That's when the final showdown kicks off. Charles gets shot, Sadie gets stabbed, and in the end, it's just John, climbing a snowy mountain to finish what Arthur started. Micah's men try to stop him, but John cuts through them. Eventually, he finds Micah, but before he can act, Dutch walks out of a cabin, gun drawn. What follows is a standoff that's been years in the making. In the end, Dutch shoots Micah and John finishes the job. Micah's gang dies with him, and with that, the last loose thread of the old gang is finally cut. He broke the gang, he betrayed them all, and in the end, he died like every coward does, alone. The Linde Gang.
But Kieran saw a couple of fellas sound like Braithwaite boys.
Where's my son?
If there's one gang that changed everything, it's this one. The Linde Gang wasn't just dangerous, they were complicated. Some days they were robbing trains like legends. Other days they were arguing over stew and getting chased out of town. Depends on who you asked and what day it was. The gang started with Dutch and Hosea, a pair of smooth-talking schemers who figured crime was better with company. So they built their own little band of outlaws. Not just muscle, misfits. Arthur, John, Charles, Javier, Sadie, even kids like Jack grew up under the campfire. For a while, it wasn't just a gang, it was a family. Messy, loud, and always one plan away from falling apart. You run into them all across the game. Snowed in at Coulter, hiding out in Horseshoe Overlook, sneaking through swamps at Shady Bell, and finally huddled up in Beaver Hollow like ghosts. Every camp gets darker, tighter. The Blackwater mess hangs over everything. And Dutch? He stops being the guy with a plan and turns into the guy with a gun and a grudge. Then there's Micah. If snakes could grow mustaches and snitch on their friends, they'd still be less slimy than this guy. Dutch starts trusting him more than the people who've been there since day one, and the cracks turn into full-on breaks. By the end, people are dead. Arthur's dying, and the dream they all believed in? Gone. Arthur does what he can to save John and Abigail, because if anyone's getting out, it's them. The rest, they scatter. Some die, some just fade out. The saddest part? This gang almost worked. For a while, they really believed they could outrun the world. They wanted freedom. What they got was betrayal, heartbreak, and Micah Bell's voice in their ears. No wonder it all went to hell. Jack Hall Gang.
I've spent the last 3 months hunting treasure on the American frontier. Beautiful country.
If there was one gang that truly nailed the get rich and vanish strategy, but only got halfway there, it's the Jack Hall Gang. These guys were smart, fast, and had just enough paranoia to bury their gold before things went south. Unfortunately, they forgot step 2, staying alive. No one really knows who started the gang. Their names are buried deeper than their loot. But they made a name robbing banks across New Hanover. They didn't just hit small-town safes either. They were thinking big, leaving behind enough treasure that strangers are still trying to map it out years later. If nothing else, they knew how to make an exit, even if it wasn't the one they planned. You won't find the gang itself in-game. They're long dead. But their story lingers in a mission called All That Glitters. Arthur runs into a guy selling a map to their legendary stash. And at first, it sounds like the usual snake oil nonsense. But Arthur's reaction, he doesn't laugh it off. He knows the name, says it like he's heard it more than once, maybe even crossed paths with someone who ran with them. Makes you wonder what really went down back in the day. Following the treasure leads you across the wilderness, from Caliban's Seat to a ridge above the Dakota River. It's not easy. There's climbing, scrambling, and more than a few moments where you wonder if Arthur's going to fall to his death for a couple of gold bars. But in the end, it's real. The Jack Hall Gang may be bones and dust now, but their gold's still waiting. You never fight these guys, and they're not in any big cutscene, but their name still floats around. Even the Linde Gang sings about them at camp. The song's catchy, but if you listen close, it's basically a history lesson. Shoutouts to old school robberies, shootouts gone wrong, and the kind of endings that don't leave anyone smiling. Rockstar definitely pulled a little from real-life gangs like the James Younger crew. Rob big, get famous, and crash harder than a wagon with no wheels. They buried their goal to come back for it later. The plan was solid, right up until the part where they all died. Dutch's gang.
Oh, it's nice to see you, John.
This gang felt more like a slow-burning tragedy than a criminal crew. Dutch van der Linde's second act in Red Dead Redemption isn't about robbing banks for freedom. It's about unraveling what's left of the man who used to believe in that dream. And somehow, along the way, he still manages to start another gang. Because of course he does. After disappearing in 1899 when the original van der Linde Gang fell apart, Dutch resurfaces over a decade later, this time up north in West Elizabeth, and instead of the old gang, he's now leading a group of disillusioned young native men, angry, desperate, and just looking for someone to believe in. Dutch steps in, promises them a return to their land, and they follow him straight into the storm. You mostly encounter them in the Tall Trees region with their main base tucked up in Cochinay. It's a cold, remote fortress, perfect for a man who doesn't want to be found, but they still leave their mark. Ambushes, stolen wagons, the occasional shootout in Blackwater. They've got numbers, firepower, and zero patience for outsiders. And Dutch, he's running the whole thing like he's playing chess with ghosts. Over the course of the West Elizabeth chapter, things get ugly. Bank robberies, hostage situations, and a whole lot of bodies. John Marston, now working for the government, gets dragged into the mess to bring Dutch in once and for all. But Dutch is slippery. He sets traps, stages ambushes, and even uses a girl as a shield during a bank heist. It's not the Dutch we knew before, but maybe it is. Eventually, the government rolls out the big guns, literally, with the U.S. Army storming Cochinay. It ends in fire, gun smoke, and one final conversation on a cliffside. Dutch doesn't run. He just lets go. He lost his gang. He lost his cause. And in the end, Dutch lost the only thing he had left, himself. Williamson Gang.
What a joy that'll be. What a proud black boy I'll be.
The Williamson Gang was what happened when a reckless outlaw got tired of taking orders and decided it was his turn to run the show. After Dutch's gang fell apart, Bill Williamson didn't head for the hills like the others. He stuck around, built his own crew, and took over Fort Mercer like it was his birthright. Problem is, Bill was never the brains of anything, and this gang, it showed. Sometime between 1907 and 1911, Bill pulled together a mix of outlaws, lowlifes, and drifters to form his own operation. They carved out a reputation across New Austin by doing exactly what you'd expect: robbing, raiding, and generally making life miserable for anyone who crossed their path. They were violent, sloppy, and bold enough to be considered the most dangerous gang left in the West, at least until John Marston showed up. The game kicks off with John trying to bring Bill in at Fort Mercer. Bill's response? Shoots him right off his horse. That sets the tone. From there, the gang slaughters Ridgewood Farm, leaves Bonnie McFarlane hanging in tumbleweed, and constantly tries to bait Marston into walking into their traps. They fail. A lot. Eventually, John teams up with Marshall Johnson and a few questionably reliable allies for a full-on assault on Fort Mercer. Wes Dickens plays decoy, John pops out with a Gatling gun, and the whole place turns into a bullet-filled nightmare. Most of the gang gets wiped out in the chaos, but of course, Bill's already gone. Slipped away to Mexico with Javier Escuella the day before. Typical. After that, the gang is finished. No members, no base, no future. Fort Mercer eventually gets overrun by banditos, and Bill's moment in the sun is officially over. They had no uniforms, no side missions, and no real identity outside of Bill himself. Just a bunch of guns behind a wall held together by fear and stubborn loyalty. Bill got the gang he always wanted and ran it straight into the dirt. Murfree Brood.
It's a free country.
Free country.
These guys are the reason people sleep with a rifle by the door and a Bible under the pillow. The Murfree Brood aren't outlaws in the traditional sense. They're what happens when you mix backwoods isolation, violent bloodlines, and a complete lack of anything resembling a moral compass. Imagine a gang raised by wolves, and the wolves got scared and left. Originally descended from a family that immigrated in the 1700s, the Murfrees settled in Roanoke Ridge and never left. Over the years, as the world industrialized, they doubled down on seclusion. By the time Arthur Morgan runs into them, they're less a family and more a feral cult of hillbilly cannibals who kidnap, torture, and kill for fun. And yeah, there's a real strong whiff of inbreeding in the air. You first properly deal with them in Chapter 5 when Arthur and Charles go scouting for a new camp. Beaver Hollow seems promising until they find out it's already home to these machete-wielding cave dwellers. The two clean house, or cave in this case, either by sneaking in or lobbing some good old dynamite to smoke them out. Along the way, they rescue a girl named Meredith who's been locked in a cage. Arthur brings her back to Ansburg, shaken but alive. After that, the van der Linde Gang uses Beaver Hollow as a hideout. But the Murfrees aren't gone, just pissed. They continued lurking through Roanoke Ridge, setting up ambushes, hanging bait bodies from trees, and occasionally charging out of the woods with machetes like they're auditioning for a horror movie. They're freakishly tough, too. Some seem to shrug off bullets like it's a minor inconvenience, and others have been known to set carts on fire and push them toward intruders. It's not strategy in the traditional sense, but it sure keeps you on your toes. Eventually, once the Linde Gang collapses, the Murfrees reclaim Beaver Hollow as if nothing happened, like cockroaches with shotguns. You can clear out their cave, take their loot, and torch the place, but the Murfree Brood always come back, like a bad dream with worse hygiene. Skinner Brothers.
The old man is half cooked. Let's leave it just at that.
If there's one group in Red Dead Redemption 2 that makes the Murfree Brood look like misunderstood hillbillies, it's the Skinner Brothers. These guys don't rob banks or chase gold. They just kill. Not for money, not for revenge. Just because they can. And they don't just kill either. They roast, skin, dismember, hang, gut, scalp, and leave human leftovers as decor. Yeah, they're basically walking nightmares with beards. The Skinners first slithered into tall trees around 1905, and by the time John Marston tries to settle down at Beecher's Hope in 1907, they've turned the woods into a death trap. No base, no laws, just primitive camps full of bones, blood trails, and whatever used to be a person. They don't have uniforms, unless you count shirt optional, machete required. You meet them in the epilogue when they ambush John, Charles, and their hired guns. One poor soul named Willard Wayne gets a knife in the eye just for doing his job. Later, they kidnap Uncle, roast his back over a fire, and nearly kill him. That's how personal it gets. But John and Charles don't let it slide. They storm the camp, put half of them in the dirt, and send a message loud and clear. Not today, psychos. The Skinners aren't gone, though. You'll still run into them in ambushes around tall trees, and they'll make sure you wish you stayed home. Sometimes they fight with bows, sometimes with blades. Sometimes they just stand there and scream before charging. They're less like a gang and more like a backwoods cult with a group discount on trauma. John can also hunt down two of their top freaks, Elias Green and Otis Skinner, as bounty targets. You can kill them or bring them in for a good old hanging in Blackwater. Either way, you're doing the world a favor. The Skinner Brothers are the monsters wearing boots, and if you're wandering tall trees alone, you might still hear them breathing.